Hi, my name is Greg Knox, and I'm the Executive Director of Skeena Conservation Trust. And I'm here to give you an update on the current steelhead situation in the Skeena. Things are looking really bad this year. We're at historic returns, and I'll get into that a bit more. But first, I wanted to give you some understanding of where we're getting our information from. So, steelhead are really difficult to count. They come into the Skeena and some of the bigger tributaries in August, September, October, but they don't go into the smaller tributaries until the spring when they spawn. So we're really trying to count a relatively few amount of fish in big river systems, and it's quite difficult. So there's only three real main sources of information. That is the Tyee test fishery, which is a gillnet boat at the mouth of the Skeena that does sets on every tide during daylight hours, and they get estimates for salmon in season and also steelhead. The Tyee test fishery is designed to count sockeye, but they can use it for other species, including steelhead. It gives us a rough estimate of steelhead numbers into the broader Skeena river system. There's also the Whitsett Mark Recapture program near Smithers, and it provides an estimate of steelhead returns into the Bulkley-Marty system, which is one of the three big tributaries of the Skeena. And then finally, we also have a fence on the Sustat River that provides a really good estimate, but it's also very high up in the Skeena system and only captures a really small portion of steelhead that enter the broader Skeena system. So these fisheries, the Tyee test fishery is run by DFO, the Whitsett Mark Recapture fishery is run by the Wet'suwet'en, and the Sustat fence is run by the province. So 2021 returns, as I mentioned, have been critically low. So far, we have seen no fish pass the Sustat Weir in the upper Skeena. There's only been one steelhead tagged in the Whitsett, the Bulkley-Marty Canyon, and that's because there's just so few steelhead going through. And then Tyee at the mouth of the Skeena, this is the worst year on record. They started estimating in 1958, and this is the worst year on record. We're sitting at about 20% of the historical average, and the current estimate of steelhead into the Skeena system is just over 5,000 fish. Typically, the province tries to get a minimum of 24,000 steelhead into the Skeena system, and an extreme conservation concern threshold is 8,000. So we're well below that 8,000 extreme conservation threshold. So I also add that there's been 0 steelhead past Tyee in the last 8 days, and there should still be decent numbers of steelhead entering the Skeena River there at this time of year. And then a bit of a broader picture, both last year in 2020 and in 2019, we had relatively low returns of steelhead into the Skeena system, although not nearly as bad as what we're seeing this year. And beyond the Skeena, there's been really low steelhead returns into the Columbia system, into other systems in Washington, Oregon, and in British Columbia. This extremely low return this year is very concerning, especially when combined with a couple of previous years with low returns. There'll be really big problems if we get another year as low as this one, because that means that there's multiple years of very few eggs being deposited into streams in the Skeena watershed. So what's going on? There's multiple things that impact Skeena steelhead. Pinnipeds or sea lions and seals are one thing. A lot of people feel that seals and sea lions are eating a lot more salmon and steelhead now, but there's no evidence out there to suggest that there's a whole bunch more seals or sea lions in the Skeena eating all of our steelhead smolts and adults. So I don't think that's a big factor here. Fukushima is another serious issue that people have raised, but there have been several studies in Alaska and here on the BC coast which show almost untraceable amounts of radiation from that nuclear disaster. So it's likely not an issue at all. And then fish farms, we don't have any fish farms in the area of the Skeena or in southeast Alaska where our salmon traverse. So it's likely not a big factor for Skeena steelhead, although they can transfer disease into the wild. So it's a possibility, but unlikely a big factor in this case. The biggest issue that we're facing is climate change, warming oceans, changing freshwater conditions, including more frequent floods, intense floods, years with really dry, low water. These have been impacting our salmon in major ways in recent years, since 2013 especially, and are also impacting our steelhead. So the other thing that impacts our fish is, of course, fisheries. And so I'll just talk a bit about who catches what and where our steelhead might be intercepted. So sport fisheries in the Skeena can have a significant impact in some areas. If you get smaller systems where you're getting a lot of sport fishing pressure, even catch and release, a small percentage of those fish will die. But if they're caught multiple times, that death rate goes up significantly. And also, even if they survive, it doesn't mean they'll necessarily survive and spawn successfully. So that does bring with it an impact. The Tyee test fishery at the mouth of the river, that gillnet boat that does the estimates, it typically intercepts around 1.5% of Skeena steelhead on a given year, and half or more of those steelhead will typically survive being caught and released. So it's a really low impact. A lot of people have been concerned for a long time about big gillnet fisheries and other commercial fisheries at the mouth of the Skeena River. In recent years, we've had very few openings, and in several years, no openings. In 2021, this year, there have been no gillnet fisheries or seine fisheries at the mouth of the Skeena, so that impact will be zero this year. There are high seas fisheries out in the North Pacific. They're legal fisheries that intercept our salmon, and they may be intercepting some of our steelhead. Probably not a big factor, but something to consider. Commercial fisheries that I think could be having really big impacts on Skeena steelhead are commercial fisheries in southeast Alaska. Those fisheries catch huge numbers of salmon. This year they caught about 750,000 sockeye salmon. Most of those would have been headed to the Nass, Skeena, and Fraser. And it's likely that they caught huge numbers of Skeena steelhead. But the problem is they're not required to count how many steelhead they catch in those fisheries. They could be killing very large numbers of our Skeena steelhead, but we simply don't know what's going on there. So that's a huge problem. So in terms of management, the provincial government manages steelhead. And recently they announced that they will be closing the Skeena steelhead fishery on October 12th. And they also announced they're going to put a bait ban in place. Whether this is enough to protect Skeena steelhead is a big question, considering the extremely low numbers we're seeing into the Skeena system. So there are things we can do about this situation. I strongly recommend that people not fish for steelhead this season just because of the really low numbers we're seeing. Try to fish for other species like Skeena coho. Skeena coho are doing well, and it would be better to try to target coho or pink salmon. Also recommend urging the federal and provincial governments to start working within the Pacific Salmon Commission to urge Alaska to count steelhead that they're harvesting in Alaskan commercial fisheries, and to reduce their bycatch of steelhead. Also, we need to step up and better protect steelhead habitats and improve the assessment information we have. The other thing you can do is please stay informed and share this video. It's really important that this information get out there so people understand what's going on. So I'd just like to say that, there is hope. Skeena steelhead are incredibly resilient. They're very diverse, and they will come back and do fine if we just give them a chance. We need to be careful about how many we're hooking, how many we're harvesting. We have to reduce the amount of impacts going on in Alaskan commercial fisheries. We need to protect their habitat, and we need to do a better job at counting them. So these are all things that we can collectively do or push our governments to do to help protect Skeena steelhead and ensure they have a bright future. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at Skeena Wild. It's info@skeenawild.org, and we'd be happy to try to help you. Thank you.